Welcome to Chamber Talk with North Orange County Chamber. Our guest today is Ruthi Hanchett. It's great to see you again, Ruthi, and thank you for sharing time with us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Ruthi is one of 3 candidates who are campaigning to be the elected trustee for Fullerton School District Area 4. Ruthi is an adjunct professor at Vanguard University of Southern California and a child, gender and human rights consultant and advocate. Ruthi and her husband, Matt, are proud parents and raising their 2 daughters here in Fullerton. And you did mention they're in the school district, correct?
Yes, they attend Fullerton School District's schools there at Raymond Elementary in part of the dual immersion Spanish program.
All right, wow. Now, Ruthi, I understand you have over 20 years' experience as an advocate for children, especially the most vulnerable. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on your works?
Yeah, I'd love to. I had the privilege of working for nearly a decade for World Vision International, which is a large humanitarian organization that works around the globe. So my job was to represent our organization at places of power. So I worked with staff in 100 different countries to find out what were the issues that children in very vulnerable places were facing. And together with communities and families and kids, we would bring those issues to places of power like the UN, the World Bank, US Congress to speak out for children. But my favorite part of that job was bringing kids to those places. I got to be an advocate and a leader of our delegations where sometimes we would bring children from one time 14 different countries along with their chaperones to speak at a World Congress on sexual abuse of children. These are kids that had seen the impact in their own communities and were speaking out because they wanted to see change. And I love those opportunities when kids are empowered to share what's going on and their ideas to make it better.
That's amazing. Do they have some support? Because obviously sharing that, they
Absolutely.
must need some type of support, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so again, you balance never wanting to put a kid in a position where they are uncomfortable or, sharing stories that they're not ready yet. Most of the children came as advocates representing their community where they may not personally have had those same experiences, but they knew what was happening to their peers and they wanted to speak out as leaders. So I do the same thing now. As an adjunct professor, my job is to coach Live to Free students, which are Vanguard University college students. We go out to high schools and junior highs throughout Orange County. We've now educated over 10,000 young people throughout the community about human trafficking and how to stay safe. Because again, when young people know that this is something that affects their own community, their own peers, they want to do something about it. And I love just giving them the space, the skills, the opportunities to do that work.
That's amazing, and thank you for that. It's a lot of work. Do you receive some type of grants on behalf of helping this, or is it a community sponsorship thing? Or?
A lot of the work we do is through, Vanguard has the Global Center for Women in Justice. So it's a kind of nonprofit study center out of the university. So we do receive grants as well as contributions, donations from generous givers who allow us to then fund these programs. So we've started a couple programs which were longer term in 2 Santa Ana high schools, working with students over a semester, again, to equip them to understand the challenges both online and in their own communities, which, believe me, they already knew these issues were happening. They just needed the skills to be able to address them. So we do that work sometimes through these donations and nonprofit work, but it's also a part of the university as our goal and our mission.
So you mentioned there that one of your highlights is when you get to be there and with the children and they're sharing their experiences. What would you say is your most significant accomplishment through this volunteer sort of experiences that you've done?
Yeah, I would say the impact that it has on real kids and real young people, because I can think of many, especially young women that I've had a chance to work with, especially as I mentor my Vanguard University students. Every year I have a new president, a new student leader who's chosen by their peers to represent and lead this student-led club. And I get to invest in them every week, training, mentoring, just getting to know them on a personal level. And I've seen them do amazing things. From one student is leading at the organization that certifies fair trade as an opportunity to make sure our products are ethically sourced. One student is working in aftercare for survivors of human trafficking. Others are working with homeless communities here in Orange County. So I love seeing the impact of what it looks like to invest in young people and see them thrive through that.
I can almost feel the enthusiasm you have. It's really good. It's actually tremendous. So, what with all that going on, what drove you, should I say, to wish to apply for the Fullerton School Board?
Yeah, there's so many reasons. Being a parent, first of all, it's very personal for me. I have two kids that are in the district. I see the impact that our board decisions make in their personal lives. And especially through, the last couple of years have been hard. Through COVID, through even the response to George Floyd's murder, we've seen a lot of concern in our community. We've seen mental health issues grow with our students and our staff. And so I've been really looking at the impact the board has in the real lives of our kids, our staff and teachers at our schools, and the families that are part of that community. So that's a big part of it, is wanting to care for my kids and my community, the families, the teachers, the comadres, the parents that I've become so connected to at Raymond Elementary. I'm also a PTA leader. So I've had the chance to, again, connect and become a part of a larger parent network and hear their concerns, hear the challenges that kids are facing in our district, and their ideas for how to make it better. And so being on Raymond's PTA and then visiting the Fullerton Council PTA, you get to hear the stories and the experiences of all of our schools, especially mamas. It's a lot of moms coming together and trying to work out how do we support our kids and our schools well. So that's a big part of it. I knew I had the skills and the experiences from both teaching now as well as working for World Vision International. I knew I had those life experiences and skills and abilities that I could offer something really valuable to the board. And I realized what an impact I had, an opportunity I have to make an impact in our community. And for me, it was just a way of loving our community well, of putting those skills and those experiences into practice to care for and serve our kids, our families, and our teachers. I've been concerned about the fact that over the last few years, our teachers have really been politicized, villainized. They went from being heroes at the beginning of the COVID pandemic to really being accused of indoctrinating students, of teaching things that are not appropriate for kids and shouldn't be taught in the classroom. And a lot of that's based on fear and a misunderstanding of what's really happening in our classrooms. As a parent volunteer, as a PTA leader, I am in the classrooms often. I know our teachers. And I really wanted to stand up and defend them as well and make sure that our bigger community knew what was really going on, the beautiful things and the ways that our teachers are responding to hard stuff, as well as the ways we can support them.
So obviously you're very much involved. As a parent, what do you think are the main sort of areas you would want to look at if you were on the board?
Yeah, listening to both our kids, our families, and our teachers, number one for me is addressing mental health. Our kids are struggling coming out of the pandemic. And when we talk to teachers especially, what they say is it shows up in discipline issues. Whether it's fights in the junior high hallways or little ones in the playground not getting along. We've been through a lot. Some of our families have really suffered through this. They've lost loved ones. They've suffered economically. Just, all of us, our mental health it's been hard. Mm-hmm. And so responding to that well is really a high priority for me. We experienced it in my own family, and that's just one story. But I think we need to back up our teachers with more support. Right now, they've had a lot of help in looking at how do we teach some basic social emotional skills in the classroom. And I've seen that curriculum. My kids have talked about it when they come home. But that's just the beginning to help our kids even get to the place where they can learn, to deal with some of the stress, the trauma, the big emotions that they're facing, to calm them down, to be then ready to engage their brains to learn. But then we need a backup system. We need more mental health professionals. And again, we've started that process with FSD. Fullerton schools do have some mental health professionals, but oftentimes they're shared between multiple school sites. They may not have the both life training and experiences as well as just the time to address the great demand that we're experiencing. So, we've got some extra COVID money right now that will eventually run out. I want to prioritize our funding long term and ensure that we have enough and that skilled and experienced mental health professionals to meet the needs of our kids as well as our staff, taking that burden off of them to be both therapists and disciplinarians, which is not what they necessarily signed up for when they trained to be teachers.
Right. And sorry, you actually twice now have touched something on the curriculum.
Yeah.
How do you feel about is there a line between parent and board? That's a difficult thing to choose or work on, isn't it?
Yes, I think people do have concerns about what's being taught in the schools. And for anyone that has great fears or concerns, I highly suggest, one, volunteer in our schools, get to know what's going on, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And also, Fullerton School District has very transparent processes to decide what curriculum is taught, what textbooks are adopted. So there's always room for parent and community input. So when we think about that process of how we decide what gets taught in our classrooms, right, it really is a collaborative community process. The board's job is to set the direction and the goals. So we might say, for social studies, for instance, that we want to make sure it's inclusive of all of our community, that kids see themselves represented, that different people groups that have contributed to America's story or the world's story, that they're represented, and even especially those that have been traditionally left out, right? So we may set those goals, but then it's an ongoing process to decide what are the actual textbooks we choose, and how do those teachers get that information and teach it well in the classroom. And that looks like our superintendent and our sub-superintendents and the staff that are professionals trained to do this work. They then go out and look at what are the state laws and requirements. What do we have to be teaching our kids? How do we find a textbook that meets those curriculum goals and is doing that well, that we like, that we can rely on? And then there's a feedback process where when a few books are selected, they're presented to the community. And there's an open process where parents, community members, business leaders can say, hey, this is great, or I wish it had more of that. And usually there's a few options to choose from. We give our input. And if we don't like any of them, we can go back to the drawing board and start over. But it's an ongoing community process. And then there's room even for kids to have input, right? Students should be interested in the stuff they're learning, and they should have an opportunity to give that feedback. I've seen that even in my own kids' classrooms. Just this year, we had a new teacher who said, y'all don't like what this curriculum that they've been using for a couple of years. And the kids said, no, it's really boring. We don't like it. She said, okay, let's find some better textbooks that you guys are excited about. Let's find some literature that you want to read rather than something that may be dry and boring, So that's what a great teacher does. They take the recommendations, they have the standards, but they also respond to the kids, the interests of their particular class that year, and they build on their enthusiasm, their curiosity, their interest, so that they're creating a curriculum together. And I think that's what we have to trust our teachers as professionals, as experienced leaders, to really do that work, to take all the input from the community and the board and the leaders of our district, but also look at what do my kids want to learn and how do I meet all those goals. It's a tough job, right? But I think that if we trust our professional teachers, and there's feedback and there's checks and balances, we can give them that space to do that well.
And that's a really good point about the teachers. In the business arena right now, it's very hard for companies to either keep their staff or employ some. What are your thoughts about that for teachers? I mean, that's a big deal. Yeah,
and we do have shortages. I mean, all around the country, we've got staff shortages. FSD is actively looking for, especially our staff that work in all different areas, from playground, lunchtime supervisors to, helping out with food services, janitorial services, staffing. It is a challenge. And so, there's lots of ways to attract the right people, from both pay and benefit packages, obviously are important to people. We want people to live and work and go to school in our community. They need a good living wage to do that well here in Fullerton in Southern California. But I think there's also things we can do, like looking at the climate of our school and the organizational cultures, right? And asking, how do we reward and validate and support our staff? And I think that when we have great schools, when people are excited to go to work every day, we attract the right people and they stay. And so I think I think even some of that comes with the board and the tone that they set. Right now, I think there's a lot of desire to recognize or say, okay, COVID's over, let's get going, just like normal, push ahead. And I think we are still dealing with some of the impact of COVID, and there are still shortages of staff, and people are still hesitant sometimes to come back to work, and the way the world has changed. So I think that there is an opportunity for us to recognize, where things are not working well, where maybe there's inequity between some of our schools, kids are really struggling. And how do we put resources there to make them an excellent place to be, where teachers are excited to come to work every day, where staff are glad they're a part of that team? And I think by acknowledging those pain points, focusing on how do we improve them together as a community, not blaming, but finding solutions together, I think that can change the atmosphere and the desire to be a part of this larger system.
Now, the mission of Fullerton School District is to work collaboratively with the community to provide innovative, high-quality educational programs for all students and safe learning. And the motto is Great Schools, Successful Kids. How do you interpret that mission?
It's a big mission, right?
It is.
Well, I think Fullerton does have great schools, and a lot of that is because of the partnerships that we have. I'm a member of the Fullerton Collaborative, and so I get that hands-on view of seeing all of the groups that are working in our community, and so many are contributing to Fullerton School District. I think about the businesses that both support financially, but also are mentoring young students through programs with FSD. I think about our faith-based communities that are supporting and even contributing, whether it's Love Fullerton or different special events where they are supporting our schools, and our families that are coming alongside our kids who really are the heart of our community. And I just love that our schools are supported by all these different groups that want what's best for our kids, and they put them at the center. And I think what that also teaches our kids is that we are a community, that their voice matters. They're also important citizens of this community, and that when they see something that needs to be changed, that could be better, that they have an opportunity to use their power, use their voice, and do it. And I love that we're working together to make this a better community, schools, as well as city for our kiddos. So, but, one of the pieces that we talked about in that motto is making sure our schools are a safe place for kids.
Right.
And that is a concern for parents right now. We all know what's been happening throughout our news cycles. We are hearing about violence that's aimed at our kids at schools. And so I think as a board member, I realize one of my first obligations and duties is to make sure we've done everything possible within our control to make our school locations as safe as possible. So I think that is in part hardening our schools. The work that's going on right now to build fences, to limit entry points, to put cameras on our schools so that it's harder to have access to commit violence against our students and our teachers and staff. But there's a lot of other elements about making our places safe that may not be first thoughts, but I think are really important. And that is, again, addressing mental health, making sure that our kids are receiving the support they need, whether that's kindergarten through high school, really, and partnering with our high school district as well. Knowing where they can go to get help. Helping parents break down some of the stigma that may be associated when we say, I don't know what to do, but I think my kid needs some help. We need to take away those barriers and stigma and let it be a conversation that we all know we can help and contribute to supporting one another. So I think addressing mental health is a big part of it. I think talking about gun safety in our community is a big part of it. Parents knowing how to properly store guns, that it's their responsibility to make sure no children have access to guns, especially by accident, or especially if there's any concern that they might use it kids shouldn't have guns to begin with, but we certainly wouldn't want them to have them if they were in any way considering violence. So talking to parents about how to make sure their guns are stored safely, and then encouraging them to also talk to their kids so they know what's off limits and how to stay safe is really important. So all of those pieces, but then finally, I really want to address how we keep our kids safe online. We give our kindergartners through our 8th graders tablets, which is important for our 21st century education.
Sure.
And during COVID, we especially saw the critical need of having this one-to-one iPad option for our kids to learn at home on Zoom. Kids need to be equipped with those tools to have a great education and to be ready for the job force. However, we know that those tools open them up to vulnerabilities and to possibilities of abuse.
Right.
So we need to talk to our kids from the beginning about how to stay safe online. Now, I personally teach a lot of classes to parents on how to talk to your kids about these issues, how to prevent abuse. I encourage parents to have this conversation from day one. As soon as their kids are verbal, as soon as you hand your toddler a phone, we should be talking about and building boundaries of support and protection for our kids. But also at school, when we give them these tools, we need to talk about how to use them safely. We need to talk about the risks in totally child-friendly, developmentally appropriate ways, but building on those skills so our kids know that, yes, this is a great tool, there are some risks, and this is how I stay safe. And even this is why I need to stay safe. Because as kids get older, they're going to be curious. They're going to want to explore. They're going to push boundaries. We want them to know it's in their best interest to have boundaries, to have rules, and to stay in places where they're going to get appropriate content and information and not be at risk of either someone going after them with ill intentions or stumbling upon content that's not helpful for them.
Well, you've also got the cyberbullying that's suddenly launched into Hall effect. The rate of children actually committing suicide is far larger now, and a lot of it has to do with the cyberbullying, which after a while, who can really control that?
Yeah, and we do have conversations with our kids about that. I mean, you know, being a parent, I see this, and I've also had conversations with our district leaders about what that content looks like when we teach our kids about these issues. So it is ongoing, but parents need to reinforce it too, and it needs to be something at the top of our minds. It's not just cyberbullying, but social media is doing all kinds of damage to our kids, right? We know the impacts. We've seen the research now, especially on young girls in the junior high, pre-junior high years, where bodies are changing, their self-image is changing. Boys and girls are affected by what they see and how they interpret it. So again, we want to build up strong, healthy kids. We want to talk about these issues so we don't just avoid it, but we actually have these deep conversations with parents, with teachers, with students, so that we are equipping our kids to just process those messages, you know, to filter them, to ask hard questions and say, to get to know themselves and the messages they're receiving so they can call out the things that aren't helpful.
How can the community help more with that type of thing? Like you were mentioning before about gun safety. Is this something classes could be given from the city or maybe from the police department? Or
Moms Demand Action is a great group that has a lot of this information. And our school district did recently put out a letter to encourage parents to look at gun safety and especially proper storage of guns. I think is a opportunity for the school district to take responsibility to encourage our parents in that way. And it keeps all of us safe, right? So that's a really important piece. When we think about social media, you know, I give a lot of talks. I'm going to be speaking at Fullerton School District has a Champions for Learning, an event where there's all kinds of workshops and lectures on different topics that relate to our kids. I'm going to be sharing on how to keep our kids safe online and preventing abuse. So I think there's a lot that we can do as parents to learn about these issues and to then have these conversations with our kids. I've seen positive examples of using social media, body positivity, people putting themselves out there and, you know, showing the difference between the before picture and the after picture, and so showing how this is not really real. They're still making money off this process, let's be clear. But I think it begins with just having these conversations with our kids of talking about reality versus, you know, what our media puts forward and it says that we should be like, right?
Sure.
Which are not realistic standards. And I have a lot of these conversations with my students at college level, but also my daughters, you know, who are 9 and 11. And we talk about these things. I think it's important for them to know beauty standards, expectations for women, especially. We don't have to conform to those things. We have choices. And breaking down some of those expectations is really important for raising healthy, well-adjusted young people.
Ruthi, is there a final message you would like to share with our listeners? Maybe it's something we haven't touched on.
Yeah, I would love to share how being a PTA leader, being involved in the schools, it has brought me so much joy and connection and community to not just Raymond or Fullerton School District, but my larger community. So I want to encourage listeners to think about how, even if you don't have a child in the Fullerton School District, to consider investing in our kids, whether that's volunteering. We have a Rising Star mentorship program for kids that are identified as benefiting from additional support of an older mentor who's going to be a healthy, safe adult in their lives. We've got programs like Love Fullerton where you can volunteer at a school. Our PTAs would love to have grandparents join and be a part of the community that is supporting our kids and our schools. So I want to encourage even businesses to think about how can you mentor or offer internships or bring in some innovative ideas to think about how do we support our kids to be ready for the workforce in another 10 years, right? So I want to encourage our community, think about how do we connect and invest in our young people, because they are so valuable and you will find so much joy in being a part of it. I know for me, it's been such a benefit. I love being connected in these ways, and you don't have to be a parent to do that work. So I want to encourage people in that. And then if they want to learn more about what I'm doing and my experiences and the ways that I'm connected to both Fullerton School District and the larger community, I'd love for them to visit my website, which is ruthyhanchett.com. You can sign up for all the newsletters and connections and things like that, but also follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Ruthi Hanchett for School Board. You can see more about the issues that I care most about, the ways I'm serving our community, and ways you can get involved if you want to support.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for coming on today. We invite you to join our email list by visiting nocchamber.com and selecting Sign Up for News at the top of the page. For more interviews, follow us on chambertalk.podbean.com. Thank you very much.